Hello, on our weekend debate is looking at the constituencies and everyone that's standing. 65, I think, in total, wasn't it? Yeah. So Douglas South, we have Claire Christian, Gerald Higgins, Sarah Maltby, and Paul Quine. So again, it's just 4 for 2 seats. You want to pick up on this one? I mean, let's start with Claire Christian.
Well, I mean, both Claire and Paul have only been in for a short time. And I think that Paul has shown himself, although he just got in, he's done very, very well, in my humble opinion, and would make a sound minister. And I think Claire came in and sort of got in and was running from day one, sort of thing.
She's very business, right? I mean, that's what her target is, I'm guessing, overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fair chance they'll both get back in again.
Right.
Very business orientated, but Claire Christian's far from a one-trick pony. She's very good on a number of areas, and I think, it's a very weird constituency because there's 4. They're all strong for different reasons, but they're all very strong candidates.
Okay.
And it'll be interesting. The voter turnout, I think, will be interesting here. Because the by-election, of course, there's a very, very low turnout in Pulrose. And it'll be interesting if there's a bigger turnout this time and what that could do in regards to this vote.
Okay.
Because different people have different areas, target areas. I mean, Claire, the business, and Paul's a very local guy there, isn't he, and that sort of thing. But I think Claire's got aspirations to be a minister, no doubt about it. I mean, she's aiming higher, I get the feeling. Quite ambitious, would you say?
Yes, I'd agree with that. I think you say Paul's dealt with local issues. Yes, I think he's a local guy made good. Mm-hmm. Make no mistake about that. But he also raises his eyes to the wider political horizon.
Just doing Claire. Anything more on Claire?
No, I mean,
okay.
I think
because just trying to do them all.
I think Sam's point about all 4 being strong is a good point.
Gerald Higgins. Now he's worked in government, of course, in income tax, wasn't it, and all that sort of thing. So he's got the
I don't know
inner workings. I know, but it's just fascinating that someone that knows the inner workings of government can then put themselves up to try and.
Did you attend the meeting?
I did, and I thought he was actually the one going into it I knew the least about. I hadn't seen him on much of anything, but one of the first questions was around tax, and he was unbelievably detailed. I mean, you'd expect it because it was his area, and there is an element of poacher turn gamekeeper turn poacher in him, in that he knows the tax system, he knows the civil service inside out. So if people are wanting someone to go in and reform the civil service, then there you go. It's somebody who knows how the civil service thinks, which is not necessarily. You quite often get people go into the government and go, "We can change the civil service and we can rip it up."
Everyone says they
Everyone says it.
They think they can. You silos.
But we have somebody who's been inside of it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something that you can look at.
So Morby?
Despite the fact that we're going round and round in circles, and we are, unless we get that relationship between government and the political process changed, there's a problem. I mean, you'll recall from many of our interviews and what I've said previously that I passionately believe in smaller, smarter government. And one of the things that has been self-evident in recent years is the emphasis government has put on moving over to digital services, which one would respect. But the corollary of that is surely that if we're going digital, then it must be the case that we are trying to become more efficient. And yet what we're actually doing is, on the one hand, moving more and more services to online, depersonalised, therefore, to some degree. And on the other hand, government keeps growing. And unless a house gets a grip of how to streamline government into a smaller, smarter organisation, believe me, we're heading for difficulties.
That's a conversation another day about how it put on so many new people when they were anyway. But anyway, should we move to Sarah Maltby, Manx Labour Party?
I tell you what, there was an interesting point actually on the night where there was a talk about should the IRM raise income tax on the higher earners, and 3 of the candidates all made very, very good and logical business sense reasons for why we shouldn't do this, why their growth, you get people like Trevor Hemmings who come into the island and invests money in the island. And the argument against doing this is that if we hike up the taxes, those who haven't necessarily been here for that long, or people who are looking at relocating somewhere, won't come here. They'll go down to Jersey and Guernsey, pay less tax down there, will miss out on their business investment. Whereas Mrs. Maltby stood up, actually said they all spoke to sitting down, so but she said, no, I don't agree with this. I think that she took a very moral line of saying, I'm not going to agree with what these three have said. This is our policy, this is what we're sticking to, and the richer should pay more tax, and that will help to boost a fairer society. Which, again, you have to sort of say, she's put herself out and said, this is what I think, and if people want signpost politicians to say, here's where we are, here's where we're going, and this is the path to it, there you go.
The contrary argument to that is that the Isle of Man depends upon being a tax competitive jurisdiction, end of, and that really we need to be fair and just within that that mechanism. But back to my point made just a few moments ago, and that is, would we pay more tax for just getting an ever bigger government? We have got, at the end of the day, there's 83,000 of us, for goodness sake. And yet government just keeps on growing. And it's a real concern to me. And therefore the issue is to drive funds, taxpayers' funds, to frontline services. And I'm not saying this now that I didn't say in Tynwald. I said it every year at the budget debates, consistently and remorselessly, saying that you have got to pay your frontline services that enable people to have the right provision from government, and yet the people who are making the decisions about where the money is spent are those further up the hierarchy, which just keeps getting bigger.
We'll bring you back to talk about this many times. Yeah. Anyway, Paul, quite to finish with, you're a fan of Paul.
I think he's done very, very well. And
how? Why?
He's when you sit in Keys and Tynwald and listen to him, his contribution is always well considered, focused, and growing in confidence. And I think that if we lost him now at this general election after only a year, I think we would lose somebody who will only keep getting better.
But he has got local support. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, like you say, he's the local lad, made himself good. My mum likes him. Says he's got a very nice voice when he was a pilot.
Yes.
She doesn't live in the area, but she thought it was quite nice.
Captain Gwine, on the way to Heathrow, I remember. Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing with him was, of course, he picked up the thing down at the airport, about a couple of £1 million we were spending that we didn't need to spend on refurbishment of taxiways. But it shows that he's using his own experience and knowledge of one area, but also able to move away from that and look into other areas that he perhaps wasn't as knowledgeable about before going into Tynwald. And he's somebody who's definitely grown, as has Mrs. Christian in the time that they've both been in. They've both grown very well from when they first went in and the bleary-eyed look of a new MHK into the hardly steel that you get a couple of years later.
Yeah, considering they were only there for just over, I think it was just over a year.
Just over a year.
They did well.
Okay, well that's it. Candidates we just mentioning there were all in Douglas South.